The typical MSP doesn't employ a real salesperson. I think the typical MSP has the owner trying to go out and get business. I know I'm a unicorn.
All right, awesome. And Rafi, let me ask you, how did you end up in this kind of crazy MSP world? You been here for a long time, or is this newer
So,
for you?
yeah, great question. I've been with IntelliComp a little over 2 years. IntelliComp, based over here in Baltimore. So Kevin Kahn's the founder, and I actually used to work for a different company where we used IntelliComp to manage our IT. So I'm a former customer, now kind of joined them in the sales role. As I'm sure you know, a lot of owners start out trying to do the sales, and after a while, they're like, not necessarily my cup of tea. So I'm more of the extrovert, go out to networking, conferences, etc. That's kind of what led me to them a little while back.
Okay, and that would mean you're a sales manager, sales director, something along those lines.
Yeah, so I'm the head of sales and marketing over here at IntelliComp. Formerly at the other company that I was at prior, I was overseeing the sales and marketing teams that we had at the time.
Okay, and that was not an MSP; it was something else at the
Nope.
previous position.
No, it was not in the IT space at all.
Okay, excellent. Well, our mutual friend Jody introduced the idea of who you are. This is our first time meeting. She was just like, I went to the sales training. This guy Rafi was there. It was amazing. I finally met somebody that really gets it. They were just very blown away with you. And so I'm really glad to get the chance to meet with you. Um, for a couple of big reasons. And if this MSP world isn't the world you have spent your last 20 years in, then I'm going to reveal a couple things to you that you may or may not be surprised about. But I'm not going to just give it to you all at once. I'm going to kind of, draw it out just a little bit. So let me ask you. Um, we don't want to know any specifics about IntelliComp, but let me ask you. What do you think the average size managed service provider is in the United States today?
That's a great question. I mean, I've met over the past couple of years, I've come across, had conversations with a handful in different states. So I've definitely have seen a different type of MSPs. So I know, I'm sure it varies greatly. I mean, even within the term MSP, I'm sure there's larger companies that may or may not only be an MSP, but have other branches. You might be part of what they do. I'm gonna guess in terms of employee count. Is that what we're?
How about if you kind of can think in terms of revenue, what would you think the revenue size would be?
I would say I'm probably gonna get this wrong, but I would assume the average MSP in America 5 to 10 million.
5 to 10 million? Okay. Um, yeah, I wish that was true. The average MSP size is about 2 million. Okay? And really, if we really dug in harder and like really narrowed our definition of MSP down a little bit, it'd probably be closer to like 1.5 to a million.
Okay.
In fact, there's the average um, is the most common, the most frequently recurring band of revenue for an MSP is more like sub 1 million. Okay, so what you are going to realize, or you might realize, it'll be a surprise here for you in a moment, is in fact I can't say that if it's going to be a surprise. So let me ask you this: how many salespeople do you think the typical MSP employs?
I think the typical MSP doesn't employ a real salesperson. I think the typical MSP has the owner, the one who started it, trying to go out and get business. I know I'm a unicorn in the sense that
Yes.
our owner brought us in. We're definitely larger than your average MSP, but I think that's kind of probably
Yeah. Yeah, so if you're 100% right, is zero salespeople is what the typical MSP employs,
yeah.
and therefore we could logically conclude sales managers. Unicorn is a great word. They are so rare. So I didn't know if you knew that, but you seem to have a sense of it, if nothing else. So I think that's really interesting. So that's part of the reason I was so excited to meet with you. It's like, oh, I've got an actual MSP sales manager that we've stumbled across. So again, very excited to talk to you. And I know that as people stumble across this video, they'll be interested to hear your take on things as well. So with where you're at today, Did you come in as the sales manager? Did you come in as something else?
No, so I came in strictly for sales.
Yeah.
So, obviously tantamount to leadership styles. Some owners keep doing what they're doing because that's what they know. Kevin, our founder, I think recognized that there's a lot running an MSP takes a lot out of you. It's a lot of in the day to day, and figuring out ways going out there trying to drum up new business is not necessarily the best use for the business in terms of his time. So that's kind of what led me to join. I don't have any IT experience background prior to coming to IntelliComp, and really my main goal in any type of sales role is really just finding people, meeting people, developing relationships. If the service you offer or the product you offer helps them, great. You do continue the conversation about that. If not, you talk about coffee or you talk about bourbon or whatever works for you, and go from there.
Right on. And so as you spent part of that 2 years here, coming along the journey, what was the transition to sales manager all about?
In terms of what?
Well, you came in as a salesperson, right?
Yep.
And now you're the sales manager.
Well, no. There's only one role. I'm the head of sales marketing. Just a one person sales team. Just me.
Got it. Okay, so that's even more interesting. Okay, so you're the sales director, but you also carry a bag. You have to deliver. You have to sell yourself as well. What's your strategy, your thoughts, or your plans around building a sales team?
So when I first joined, obviously had high hopes. Let's go about this. Let's see what we can drum up, and then build the sales team. I never want to hire somebody unless I can give them the blueprint to success. I don't want to hold, prior to joining IntelliComp, I was part of a different company which had more corporate structures. Here's the goal, here's the quota, hit it, good luck, and hopefully you manage to get there. Not necessarily with realistic expectations. And so if I'm ever going to bring on future salespeople, I want them to know very clearly how they can be successful so that can be managed well. Now, you can't manage somebody, hey, you're not hitting your numbers, not doing well, if you yourself can't tell them how to do that. So the past 2 years has been a lot of trial and error, trying to see what works, what doesn't work. To your point, most MSPs don't necessarily have a salesperson. The idea of, I get hit up on YouTube and all these other people all the time trying to sell me some aspect of improving MSP sales. But until I really know what that is, I'm just going to keep doing it myself, trial and error, figuring out what works. I know a different MSP, a competitor of ours who I have a good relationship with, and they told me their only real strategy is going to conferences. I can tell you they must spend hundreds of thousands of dollars over the course of a year or two, and not with a definitive ROI. I have another smaller MSP, not that one, a different one, who recently was scheduled to go to a conference that I was looking into. When I found out that they backed out, I reached out to him to ask why, and he said, I'm just pouring a lot of money into these conferences. The decision makers are attending, but they're not necessarily looking and searching for MSP work, so the ROI ain't there. Now, I'm sure there are those who might say, listen, you got to play the long game, you got to go to the conferences, meet them, and eventually, maybe someday. But for most MSPs, that doesn't work. If you're backed by private equity, venture capitalists, maybe that can work. But most of them are trying to turn a real profit and, give their customers high level of service.
That's right. That's right. It's interesting around conferences. I've got a good buddy. I reference him a lot because he's just so unique in so many ways. He's maybe 14, 15 million, which is really awesome. Nice profit. Is a sales driven owner, and he built his business in two ways, and he just serves dental. So he said, number one is it's really hard to work for dentists. So he said, you either serve one or you serve 100, or you serve none or you serve 100. You don't just serve one or two because they're too difficult. But he's like, I just embedded myself in that world. So I get I built the company on making relationships with the distributors, the vendors for dentists, Peterson and whatnot. So that was one. But then to your point about the conferences, he said, I won't go to a conference unless I'm speaking. Okay, so he's like, if I'm not speaking, there's no point for me to be there. And that's just his take, and it works very well. But what's unique there is that he's willing to speak, and he's very good at it. When you think of conferences, what would your angle be if somebody said, hey, there's a conference, a bunch of our potential clients will be there? Would you be more on the, well, let's find a speaking slot, or would you be more on the, we're just going to carpet bag and kind of walk around and try to meet people? Where would you be in that continuum?
Well, obviously, the first thing I do when a conference pops up is I try to speak to somebody who's been there beforehand, really understand the lay of the land, really understand, like you said, our customers are going to be there. If that's the case, that's an important detail to know. If the conference was one where we have a number of customers, my entire approach to that would be introductions from our customers on the ground. But if it's just a general conference that I don't necessarily know any, but other vendors and other industries have told me, yes, this is a great conference, decision makers are there, they're open to conversations, you'd be walking around saying, hi, I'm Rafi, nice to meet you, what's your name, what do you do, where are you from? And just trying to develop relationships like that. I'm not an expert in anything, so I'm not going to get up on stage and speak because I'm not going to add any value to anyone. If they want to talk and chat and, go in that round. That's generally how I would approach it. But again, the first thing I do looking at conferences is really try to learn about, is it, because, you could go to conferences three a day every day for the entire year and spend millions of dollars. But we don't all have unlimited time and resources.
We do not. No, we do not. Yeah, it is that for MSPs, that is kind of this interesting conundrum of, wow, it looks like a good conference. I might be a little more introverted than is going to be helpful for me to be there. Maybe I have this new salesperson who's really energetic. Should I send them? Shouldn't I? And I think a lot of times the MSP owner gets really lost in their decision making there on like, well, if I send them, what's my ROI? They're asking some of the right questions, some of the wrong questions. So I think conferences is just a really tough one. So I like my buddy's approach where he does happen to have value to bring to the stage. And it's just such a long play for him. And in dental, pretty good conferences to go to in that just very niched down, kind of space.
Yeah.
With your role now in the first 2 years versus what you were selling or representing before, what kind of differences have you seen in more difficult, less difficult, more accessibility to potential clients, less accessibility? What have been some of your observations?
So obviously this is just my opinion, but I would venture to say IT sales are probably the hardest out there. Prior, I was in more of a company that dealt with staffing, and it's a very specific niche. So you were essentially calling the industry that we served was education. So you're calling schools saying, I see you have an opening. Do you have an opening? And 90% of the time they did have an opening. And the question wasn't, can you fill it? The question is, should I give you an opportunity to test one of your people versus the other 800 vendors who call me all the time, and why? Right? So there was always opportunity. And the question was, should we give you that opportunity? With IT sales, I've found that you have either a company that has an in-house team who they're happy with, or you have somebody who they're outsourcing partially or all the IT, and then they could love who they use. And if they love who they use, not a chance you're going to have that conversation. Even if you're cheaper, even if there's other value to add, if they're thrilled with their IT company, they're not switching. And if they're not, then you have to figure out the timing of said decision, because for us to switch IT is such a big deal. If we're going to do it, it's got to be, that one day that none of us are working. But I'm sure you guys will figure out a way to do that in the middle of the night and just change everything over and make everything work, right? Right? You can do that. So usually finding the opportunity is much harder. The actual timing of said decision and then finding the right person to make the decision, because the office manager could hate the IT company. The COO could be related to the IT company, and the CEO is like, I don't know, guys, just make it work. Like, wait, why are we down today? I'm upset because we're down today. Oh, we're switching? Oh, and nobody told me. But yeah, we sent you like 800 notifications. Like, no. I'm the CEO. I'm the owner. Nothing's ever wrong. So yeah, definitely a lot more challenges, a lot more nuance to navigating how to create, find, and then manage said opportunities.
Yeah, yeah. It is, I've lived in this MSP world for so long, for 20 years now, and I get to talk to, dozens, if not 100, salespeople in MSP space, whether it's an owner doing the selling or a salesperson. And I'm just so accustomed to the stories that I lose track of the fact that this is one industry. There's 1,000 others that I know nothing about, how easy or hard it is to sell, and how this solution compares. So it's always interesting to hear. Now, what I'm going to ask your thought on this. Would we agree that it is a long sales cycle, or would we have a different view from each other on that?
I would agree. However, I will tell you, I met another sales leader for an MSP at a conference probably 8 months ago. And during that, we were talking, and I mentioned, the long sales cycle. And he told me, when I joined the organization and I met the owner was telling me, by the way, just so you know, the IT sales cycle is really long. And he told me, he's like, I stopped the owner in his tracks and I said, listen, that may or may not be true, but don't you ever say that to a salesperson that you hire.
Right.
Right? You're like out of the gate, out of the gate. Hey, by the way, welcome. We'd love for you to do sales. Just so you know, it might take you a year to close a deal.
Yeah.
Just so you know. Like, that's not going to build any, which is probably why there are not as many salespeople in the IT field, because you have to be able to, I got this.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
The long haul. And that takes a lot for somebody to be committed, to understand the overall mission, understand the company and like the value they bring, and know, like, okay, once the same way it's a long sales cycle to get in, it should also be for the sales cycle to get out. So like you're really, if there was ever an industry that was every salesperson in any industry says, yeah, I'm about relationships, I want to meet people. Like if there was ever an industry where you have a long-term customer, it's definitely managed service. Well, I can tell you that when I joined IntelliComp, part of my process was, let me meet with some existing customers and hear, what do you love about IntelliComp? How did you originally find them? That kind of thing. And I met with a company that does construction as well as playground development. So they'll come in and they'll, help a municipality set up a playground in a community. And when I met with the owner, he's been with us 20 plus years. And, obviously that's a testament to to have a customer for that long.
Yeah.
You're investing in a long-term relationship.
For sure. That's a good point. Yeah. If it's long getting in, it should be long term. I think that's a fair statement. So if that sales cycle is long, and I'll tell you, I think a lot of times it's long, is that we kind of suck at sales in this industry and we don't always lead the sale. We end up following along and let the prospect lead. And we could dive into that for 10 hours, of course. But if it's long, then tracking that sales pipeline in those stages gets critically important, and really pumping a lot in the top of that funnel is so critical. What have been your experiences in that? I don't know what kind of sales infrastructure you walked into 2 years ago, but did you find, tell me what you've done kind of infrastructure wise to say, how well is our, opportunity tracking system built? How flexible is what we're using? And how have you kind of constructed those stages and funnel for yourself?
Yeah, I mean, systems can always be improved. That's something that always has to be tweaked. I think that coming in, we have our existing ticketing system, and there was certain aspects that could do, and then I kind of brought in I've used HubSpot, let's use HubSpot and just kind of track things. And there, honestly, between you and me, and obviously whoever's watching this recording, I probably have 2 or 3 different areas where I'm tracking things and monitoring things. But I will say that to the point of, that I mentioned earlier, trying to figuring things out so that in the future I can bring somebody in who can be properly managed and expecting of them. Part of having a strong pipeline is lead generation. And then knowing who's a real opportunity versus just somebody who happens to be, needs to be nurtured or what have you. So from my experience, that, tracking the opportunities as they kind of go along is not as challenging just due to the volume. Like, I'm able to manage the volume that we have, kind of check in and see where things stand, and lead as much as possible. But I do think that the main challenge that I've seen is lead generation, and so for that, testing different things, trying different things, to really find what is going to work well, not just for the industry, but every company is different. In other words, I remember early on, one of the conversations that I had with leadership was trying to determine who would be an ideal candidate to work with us. Not just because every company needs IT support does not necessarily mean they're a good fit.
Right.
And I think being able to use that information in different external efforts to generate leads, that to me is the most important, because that will allow whatever happens in the pipeline. Like, are we just going to call it like this company's not really interested? Yeah.
Yeah. So okay, so the lead gen piece, I think we could spend some time in there. I have this question or this observation for you, because I think a lot of owners are kind of in a similar position that you actually are in, which is, I am the salesperson, I am the sales director. Therefore, as I go through my day to day, I have to be thinking about how am I doing this in this moment, but also what foundation can I be laying down for the next people coming in to either work for me in the future or for the next person when I get elevated up in the world. I think you building that infrastructure while you're doing it. How do you balance that of saying, I gotta do the daily activity of selling, but I also have this infrastructure to build? How do you balance that?
So, I mean, for an owner who's, eventually looking to bring in somebody to do the sales, I think they have to recognize where their strengths are and what their time adding to the business does the most. So, for example, when it comes to sales organizations, not only in the IT space, some organizations will have an appointment setter, and then they'll have the closer, right? They'll have different aspects of the sale managed differently. So I think you have to understand your capacity is. How often am I going to have to bring in an IT specialist to talk to an organization's director of IT or CISO or CTO? How important is that going to be in the process? For example, in the industry that I was formerly in, it was teletherapy related. So if we were talking to a special ed director of a school, we had to bring in somebody who was licensed and specialized in that thing if they had a certain question that popped up in that. So part of navigating sales conversations, if you're the owner operator and you know IT really well, then you might get down in the weeds too early on, and you might get sidetracked, and you might start throwing out resolutions while not realizing, hey, this guy's not paying you money yet, right? You need to be able to determine if this is a customer. Some owners have that capability, and some are just, they live in the IT world, so they're right away trying to resolve and fix things. Well, the reality of sales is, hey, let's have a conversation. Let me give you a basic idea of what we do. If that's a good fit, and you feel like it's worthwhile taking to the next step, happy to do that. If it does get very nuanced, just know I might have to bring in other people, and we'll have to determine how and when to do that. So, infrastructure-wise, that's a huge component, because you don't necessarily want to have your, engineers hop on sales calls. That might not be the best use of their time. They should be doing other things. At the same time, you do need some capacity for them to be available because these things are going to come up. And so trying to determine at what point, how available, you really have to figure that out because especially if you're going to bring on a salesperson, because a salesperson is not going to want to feel alone. They're not going to feel like, okay, I have a call, it's going great. This guy has a really specific IT question. I can't wait 48 hours to get an answer on this specific thing. So navigating that, knowing your internal resources, I think is a huge component of it.
Yeah, for sure. We're getting some bad feedback. Did that just correct itself?
I'm not getting the feedback.
Okay, I'm just gonna go like this first. Actually, I'm gonna mark this moment here. All right, cool. So with that, like you just zeroed in on an excellent point within that sales infrastructure. How do we flow in and out of bringing in other resources to support, the future salesperson or yourself? How about things like you mentioned you're using HubSpot or using like the sales professional licenses type of thing?
Yeah, I mean, like I'm a small person team, right? So it's not as, there's a lot of different tools out there. I'm not necessarily saying that's the one that everybody should use, but the ticketing system that you might be using to service your clients might not be the best option for tracking customers and updating things. But obviously, if you have the ability to integrate and make things work well.
So we're a smaller company ourselves. We use HubSpot. We use HubSpot marketing, HubSpot sales, licensing, and I love that tool. Like I'm a huge fan of it. I know that I've been running it for like 8 years now or so, and we go through seasons where we have a couple salespeople and they're killing it, and for whatever reason they go away, and then we don't have salespeople for a while. Right now we have salespeople again, and I just think every time we've invested in building out that HubSpot sales tool, it pays us dividends later. As it's the one thing that doesn't change is I'm always the salesperson, so I kind of have to behave as if I am a salesperson for the organization and treat it as if I have a sales manager who's saying, well, let me know what you did. Show me where you're at in this thing. Show me how well you're tracking. So over, however many years, I've gotten very accustomed to acting and behaving as if I am accountable to someone other than just myself. I think that's part of the question I have for you is, when you go through your day, you can track a lot of it in your head, just like I probably could as well. But I always have to walk this balance of, if I do this now, how hard will it be for me to snap out of it and be ready to manage someone else in the future if I haven't done a great job of documenting who I've been talking to, what my opportunities look like. How do you balance that kind of, dual roles of being a salesperson and being potentially responsible for people in the future and building out a structure for them?
So I don't know. That's a good question. I don't necessarily have a good answer for that.
That's fine.
I definitely think about it.
Yeah.
To your point of keeping it in the head, because when you build something, it starts from the bottom up, and so I don't want to build something that's not necessarily going to be optimal. So in this trial and error, trying to figure out what works, what doesn't work, cold calling is a great tool. Is that the best tool for a new salesperson in the IT space? Yet to be determined. So just understanding how to leverage and use different tools that are out there. It's a good question. I don't know. I don't. Food for thought.
Fair enough. And okay, well, let's talk about cold calling and prospecting for a second. I'm an old man. I have lots of opinions. I think I'm right on everything, but typically I have a little bit of evidence of why I'm right. So I'll throw it out there, and you and I can talk about why I might be onto something or not onto something. I think cold calling is the best thing to sell IT services in 2025. Right? That's my take. What's been your kind of experience with that in the IT space so far? You probably have some evidence on why or why not that might or may not be true.
I'm definitely a fan of cold calling. I think cold calling is a useful tool. I think that from my perspective, the hardest aspect isn't the actual calling, but it's figuring out the best list. In other words, if you're like the friend you mentioned earlier, if you just serve dentists, then you make a list of dental offices, you figure out who you're calling, and you go from there. If you serve multiple industries and you're trying to determine and break it down and figure out who the best person to cold call is and how to navigate those conversations, that can obviously be a challenge. But yeah, 100% cold calling, if done right and if done well, you'll leave a lot of voicemails or not, depending on what your perspective is on leaving voicemails, not leaving voicemails. I know that there's plenty of discussion on that.
Yes.
If you'll do this type of opener, that type of opener, I generally speaking try to, anything that I do, whether it's emailing, cold calling, talking to people at conferences, I try to do it a few different ways and try to play around with it and see what works. So whether that means, because I've seen all the opinions online, whether that means developing a relationship with a gatekeeper so that she'll put you through, or pushing through the gatekeeper so you get through, there's no right or wrong, in my opinion. You have to be comfortable with your style, who you are.
Yes.
You can't go out there to sell and be somebody that you're not, because that comes across pretty quickly. So just being who you are, trying to navigate that. If you're talking to the office manager, but you really want to talk to the COO, try to do your research, try to see, is there a director of IT? Do they have a potential to have it being managed in-house? Is there any information you could possibly get to see, are they working with a competitor? Do you know the competitor? Do you know other issues, other prospects you've heard from that have been running into certain issues? Like, for example, I know of a local real estate company over here, and I know which MSP they use, and they love them.
Right.
So if I come across another organization that mentions that they use that company, I'm going to be listening very carefully. If they also love them, great. So then that's not going to be our target. But if you hear of another MSP that people are not happy with, okay, why are they not happy? What's going on? Try to reach out with those specific topics.
Right. And let's get into the cold calling just a little bit, even deeper here. Well, we'll stay on the list for a second. What have you been doing so far that's been somewhat useful in terms of where to source leads or lists or contacts or whatever we call them?
I don't know if my opinion is going to be popular here, but I have tried different things. I'm not a fan of spending a ton of money on an engine that might give you the right information, that might give you good buyer intent. I'd much rather try to curate my list instead of spending X thousands of dollars per year, and try to develop a personal relationship at the same time. So if I'm typing into different tools that are out there based on region, based on size, based on industry, and trying to find the decision makers in said industry, I'm simultaneously going to go on LinkedIn and try to find that person and try to connect with that person. So if I'm not reaching them by phone, maybe I can reach them through other means. But I definitely try as much as possible to use the tools that are out there, or even just testing out different approaches, going into Google, trying to say, okay, this is the industry, this is the region. Let's start looking and seeing who can we call. I definitely have not found the silver bullet. So if anybody out there is like, oh, no, I figured out how you do it. This is what you want. This is how you go about it. I'm always open to that conversation. But I think to your point with the dentist friend, sometimes serving multiple industries is great, and it can allow you to get different type of business. And sometimes that's your Achilles heel, because you can't, really filter down too much of a narrow list focus. So that could be a challenge.
Yeah, it's tough. I think a lot of MSPs, they're always on this journey, and they get these fits and starts, and sometimes talking about ideal client profile is really hot in our industry, and sometimes people forget even what that means. And I think once an MSP starts getting into that sales-minded growth strategy time, I think they need to really double down and say, well, what is our ideal client profile? And I see them a lot do these kind of best efforts, but not guided enough to really get somewhere with it. So I'll say, okay, well, tell me a little bit about who you want to serve. And I hear these things like 50 to 100 users. And I'm like, Okay, do we agree that that's radically different between 49 and 99, users? That's very different. And why do we say 49 or 50? Why don't we say 10? Why don't we say 15? And I think that's such a tell as to what they think is going to happen when they start building the lists. Like, well, if I just say 20 users, well, God, what about the 21? What about the 19? What about the 30? I could serve them. So I think finding where to grab those lists or grab those contacts or keep sorting out, I think people get really anxious about getting too narrow focused. How about y'all over there? Are you guys willing to get pretty narrow of who you want, or are we kind of like, hey, we'll talk to everybody and we'll find out who we can serve?
We're definitely guilty of that. I mean, I think that the way I kind of look at it, and again, we could talk about this for hours, but the way that I kind of look at it is at some point you have to give yourself a range to be able to figure out how to filter the range. So, if a company is a certain size and you're finding when they hit a certain size, they're going to have an internal IT team and not being outsourced. So then that's the reason for filter number one. If it's an industry that although they have X number of employees, but they're really spread out, they're remote, they have different sites in different states. So even though they have X number of employees, that still might not dictate that they're not looking for an MSP. So for example, we do a lot in the healthcare space. We serve a lot of skilled nursing facilities, assisted living facility companies. Very often, the owners could live in state X and own facilities in states Y, Z, and AB, which leads itself to, even though the company, if you were prospecting that company, they have 1,000 employees. Well, 1,000 employees is a lot. If you were looking at a law firm with 1,000 employees, they have an internal IT team, right? So it's not one size fits all. So I think that the exercise of really fine tuning and filtering can work, but only if it's there to prove something about success, right? If you're only looking after users, companies with 22 users that are in your county and not your state, I can understand why an MSP would not want to do that. But if the reason to do that was to determine something and it was wildly successful, great,
Right. Yeah, you got that whole concept of addressable market as well, which is, well, if my ideal is this, let me use the tool to kind of see, well, God, how many are even available for me to serve in my area? What is the GDP of my county or my service area? And sometimes we get really challenged on, oh wow, who I want to serve doesn't really exist in the volume that I would hope it did.
right?
Maybe I want to know that, or maybe I don't. Maybe I'd rather just kind of keep my fingers crossed.
Yeah, I mean, I'll also add that because we're a 30-year-old MSP and we have a substantial amount of customers, a lot with a certain amount of size, and going to your point about long sales cycle, it does sometimes make sense to invest in less of a reach, but a larger customer. So it might take you 6 months to close the deal or a year to close the deal, but it's a sizable customer, so it's worthwhile to kind of take that approach.
You have this dual role. I think I heard you say sales and marketing. All right. So how do you decide, or how do you find yourself being intentional in splitting the time? Because those are two radically different things. Do you tend to have more affinity for one aspect or the other? How do you spend your time? How do you break your time out?
So sales and marketing are obviously two different things, like you said. Sales could just be the hunting aspect and obviously managing it once they've entered your door, right? If you're in a store, somebody walks in, you want to get them to buy if they're a good fit. Marketing is ensuring that you're top of mind, ensuring that you're there. So I enjoy both. I think the thrill of closing a deal, there's nothing like that. The creativity that marketing allows you to try different things can also be a lot of fun, and you could use different aspects. I think that if you don't do the right marketing, you don't have enough in the pipeline to do the sales with. So you have to kind of use your judgment. If your pipeline is full and you need to absolutely manage a tremendous amount of follow-up conversations, etc., then you might have to outsource marketing or just kind of manage it from afar. But I think that, again, to your other question earlier, I wouldn't say I have it down to a science of, Monday is marketing and Tuesday is sales call, which sometimes I'll do that. I'll block off time and try to concentrate on one over the other. But I like to wear both hats, take them off and on, and see what works and what makes sense.
How do you would you consider yourself having a strong marketing background, or are you kind of in this role where you're learning and developing and finally getting a chance to try? Where on that spectrum would you land?
It's a good question. Let me think about it for a second.
Sure, take your time.
I definitely don't have enough experience in any world to say I have a strong, I would never call myself a strong marketer or a strong salesperson. I mean, we're all figuring this out as we go along. I think MSP sales are definitely the hardest that I've experienced. And I think that also translates into marketing in a sense that we can all do the same things. We can all put ads out there. We can try to be creative with the ads. We can try to, market a certain way. But until you really understand your customer or you really understand what's bringing them in, I mean, I have people coming over to me all the time. Oh, I love that post you did. I love that video you posted. So I know we're doing something right in terms of the marketing. Does that mean that it always translates into the right audience and the right conversations? Well, the goal is not always necessarily just to generate conversations. The goal is to be top of mind so that when those opportunities exist and present themselves, the people can come in. So I enjoy both aspects. I think there's a lot in that. I think that I like trying different things and nuanced things. For example, when I first joined, I'm trying to find it on my desk over here. I actually moved it off. But I did a coffee mailer where I took a crumpled piece of paper. What I did first actually was I mailed out these to a specific target audience. These are pictures of Nespresso pods in case
Right.
you didn't know.
Beautiful.
With a handwritten note
Yes.
to, I think, around 50 or 60 different individuals.
Yes.
That was step one of that campaign.
Nice.
Step two of that campaign was we sent out a Nespresso pod and a bubble mailer with my business card and another handwritten note, smaller handwritten note about the size of this. Sent that out. And third, we sent out, I happen to have most things on my desk still, but third, we sent out this coffee mug
Yeah.
with the coffee that we sent them.
Nice.
How many deals did I close because of that? None. So
Okay.
it sounds like a great idea, and it sounds like it could work, but
Okay. We're here now. We've found our home, Rafi. Okay. I had the wonderful opportunity. The firm that we use for marketing, they're called Tactics. Matt Middlestetter, he's a wonderful guy, and I've known him forever. And we had this opportunity to drive from his town in Central Oregon to Missoula, Montana. So I got like 15 hours in the car with him, and I was relentless with like making him tell me all these interesting things. He's a wonderful marketer, just a wonderful person. And what you just described, you did. He was describing for me what that is, and he called it account-based selling. And the idea, he said, was you find some number, probably not more than 100, probably not less than 20 or 30. You find this magic sweet spot of just these people that you think could be a really good fit for you. And he said, your job is to, number one, your first only job is get them to like you. Okay, just get them to like you. So whether that means you sent them an espresso pod or a nice handwritten note or something that they like, you just kind of start the process. And when you determine that this person isn't giving any indication that they're going to like me, say, I'm going to take them out, and now I got to fill the top of that, so I always have that 50, 60, however many we have. And he said it's a long journey, and you're looking for those moments where you start saying, oh, they might like me. They are giving some indications they like me. But he said it's a very long play. So I have not done that yet. I just think it's brilliant sounding. Who knows if it works? But Matt usually has a good track record with me. So you took what he was talking about, but you probably didn't come out thinking I want them to like me. What was your objective in that 60? What were you hoping the best out or the most likely outcome would be?
So, like I said, I like trying different things. I've actually did two other things that I've done similar. One that I'll tell you in a second, which actually landed a meeting. But the idea was IT sales are long. Nobody necessarily wants to talk about IT. They have to like you, obviously. But I never want. My personal belief is not they like people buy from people they like. That's true and it's not true in the sense that if you don't bring me the value that I need, I'm not buying from you. I'm not buying from my uncle just because he's my uncle. At the same time, I'm a relationship-driven person. The company's a relationship-driven company, and I love coffee. So I'm leading with that. It's supposed to be different and nuanced, and just really there to start conversations. And if they're not going to start a conversation, then either they don't have a need for IT, or that approach doesn't work for them. And the truth is, if that approach doesn't work for them, they might not be the best customer. If they're a little bit too rigid and too cold, then it might not work for them. I mean, similarly, I did cold calling. This goes back about a year ago, and a local home health company. Still waiting to hear back from them now, but I'll tell you what happened. Home health company, and reached him. He says, "Oh, glad you actually called. We have a migration project we're looking at, and we don't know if we could do it." And blah blah blah. Fine. He went dark, went cold. I dropped off. This is actually, I'm going to give credit where credit is due. Dale Dupree, if you look him up on LinkedIn, he and your friends from Oregon will get along. Dale Dupree, I dropped off a Dunkin' Donuts box with no donuts inside, just crumbs. And a note that said, sorry, ate all the donuts, waiting to hear back from you, with a gift card inside. And left it, and I drove it and dropped it off at his office. And he called back. And we had a follow-up conversation. We had a few conversations after that. Again, we fell off the map once again. But that's, those types of things I think not enough people are doing. So yes, a lot of effort, it's a lot of money, takes a lot of time.
Yes.
It can work. Now again, from an ROI standpoint, is that the best use of time? You never know.
You never know. You never know. But okay, so let's keep thinking about your 60 folks. By the way, I absolutely love the donut thing. That's hilarious. Those 60, you said, okay, I'm going to see if we can get the conversation started. Did you pair that? And I'm asking not to lead you somewhere, more curiosity. Did you pair that with anything else? Like, were you saying, step one, send them something. Step two, email them something. Step three, like, did you have it kind of broken out in these phases?
So the coffee mailer, yes.
Yeah.
That was a step one, step two, step three approach. The idea was they're going to get this,
Yeah.
they're going to throw it out.
Right.
But they're going to see it, oh, this guy thing, throw it out. The next thing's going to come, and they're going to be like, well, what am I going to do with an espresso pod? And then they're going to get the mug, and then they're like, okay, I got to call this guy. Now, I did reach one of the people who I sent the mug to, and they loved it. But I had to call. I called all of them, obviously afterwards. That was step 4, trying to reach all of them. So sometimes things work, sometimes things don't work. And
no, let's not eject just yet with throwaway statements like some things work, some things don't. We're going to stay here, Rafi. All right. So you step 4 was you send them those things. Was it a week in between sending things? Was it a month? What was your cadence?
I think what I did with the card was we mailed the card out, and I think I sent the bubble mailers out 3 days later.
Yeah.
And the mug, I think 5 days after that.
Okay.
Something in that cadence. And then the call was, I tried to do the call the day of or the day after the mug arriving.
Right.
And the call was, hey, I just want to make sure you got the mug that I sent you.
Okay.
Because that way, it's not a sales call.
Right.
I sent you a mug, I just want to make sure you got it.
Sure. And so how many people picked up that phone call? Or how many people did you talk to from that call?
Out of 50 or 60, I talked to probably 5.
Okay. and the other 55 or so, we've never. Okay. How about any
Hey,
emails?
Josh, I do have a call at 12.
You have a 12. All right, we're going to wrap up here in just, what time is it? Oh, God, it's 12 right now, isn't it? Oh, all right. Well, listen, Rafi, it was a pleasure. I could have stayed here all day talking about this. We'll cut this last piece in here, but was this fun? Did you enjoy this, I hope?
Sure, it's always good to learn, have conversations, and
Yeah.
yeah,
Excellent, man. Well, thank you for taking the time to be with us.
you got it, Josh. I appreciate
All right.
it.
Catch you later.